At 2 a.m. I woke up to the smell of gasoline and the sight of my grandfather's vintage tractor engulfed in flames. This wasn't vandalism, this was a message. And what started as a neighborhood dispute just became a national security incident? When you think of HOA drama, you probably picture someone getting fined for their grass being too long or the wrong color mailbox. But what if I told you my local HOA tried to burn down my farm? That they used phony rules, forged documents, and secret funding from a billion-dollar corporation to pressure me into giving up my land? And what if I told you that land turned out to be the key to solving America's food crisis? No, this isn't a Netflix movie. This happened. And it started with a pink tracksuit, a gold-plated welcome letter, and a woman named Karen who hated tractors. In this story, you'll see how a simple man with a dream of peaceful farming got caught in a war he never asked for against a ruthless HOA, corrupt officials, and a development empire hiding behind community rules. You'll witness a fiery act of intimidation caught on camera, a surprise visit from the President of the United States, and a shocking discovery buried beneath 5 quiet acres of farmland. But most of all, you'll see what happens when one person refuses to be bullied, even when the system, the money, and the power say he should. If you've ever stood on land your family built, if you've ever been told by someone with a clipboard that you don't belong, if you've ever had to choose between peace and principle, then this story is for you. Because when they tried to burn down my legacy, they didn't realize I'd already planted seeds that no fire could kill. Come back with me to that fateful night where it all started with a burning smell and a fire that no one could put out. The day I moved in was perfect. Clear skies, a light breeze, that kind of quiet you can only find when your nearest neighbor is a football field away. I had finally made it. 5 acres, a fixer-upper farmhouse, and right in the middle of it all, my grandfather's 1952 green and Selly John Deere tractor. My inheritance. My pride. Then came the envelope. Crisp, white, gold lettering. So formal it looked like a wedding invitation. Inside, a letter from the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. Welcome to the community. Membership required. Annual dues, $500, 0 cents. I laughed. Must be a mistake. I hadn't bought into a gated neighborhood. This was farmland, land that had been in my family before their cookie-cutter homes and manicured lawns were even a dream. Still, I read through the letter. Regulations about mailbox colors, lawn height. Restrictions on unsightly structures. I tossed it in the trash, assuming that was the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning she arrived. Pink velour tracksuit, giant sunglasses, diamond earrings that could blind a deer at 50 yards. She didn't knock, she strutted. "You must be the new neighbor," she said, flashing a smile that had all the warmth of a frostbitten handshake. "I'm Karen Wilkins, president of the Oak Ridge Estates." I offered her lemonade. She ignored it. "I noticed you haven't returned your membership form," she said, glancing over my shoulder at the tractor parked near the barn. Her nose wrinkled. "And that piece of equipment is a clear violation of our visual harmony guidelines." I kept it calm. "Ma'am, my property isn't part of Oak Ridge Estates. This land has been outside the HOA boundary since the 70s. I've got the deed, the map, everything to prove it." Her smile evaporated. "Every property in this zip code is under our authority," she snapped. "That eyesore needs to go. It's bringing down property values." That night, I didn't sleep. I pulled every document I had, Granddad's deed, a 1974 zoning map, even the recorded plat survey from the county. The next morning I sent Karen a respectful email with everything attached. Clear as day, my land is legally and geographically exempt from their HOA. Her response? 5 violation notices. 1 for the tractor. 1 for my vegetable garden. 1 for the chicken coop I was building. 1 for the color of my mailbox. And 1 labeled failure to cooperate with community cohesion standards. Apparently non-compliance is now a crime against neighborhood spirit. So I started digging deeper. And what I found chilled me. In Nevada, a family was sued for growing tomatoes. In Florida, a war vet was fined $250.00 a day for flying the American flag. In Texas, a grandmother lost her home, because her fence was painted the wrong shade of beige. HOAs were never supposed to be government, but over time they learned to act like it. They use vague language and fake urgency. They send letters that look official, and, if you don't know your rights, they bury you in paper and fees until you fold. And here's what I learned fast. If you refuse to be controlled, they label you a problem. Not because you broke the rules, but because you challenged the system behind the rules. They weren't coming after my tractor. They were coming after my will to fight. And while I didn't know it yet, that fight was going to escalate far beyond HOA complaints. Because a few days later someone decided paper notices weren't enough. They came for my tractor with fire. I used to think tyrants came with guns. Turns out they come with clipboards. After sending Karen the proof that my land was outside her HOA's reach, I expected her to back off. Instead, the letters multiplied. First it was the mailbox, then the garden hose visible from the street, then the height of my chicken coop. In violation of suburban harmony aesthetics, whatever that meant. Every letter was stamped with some official-looking emblem written in legalese and ended with a threat. Failure to comply will result in a daily fine of $100.00. They never knocked on my door. They never asked to talk. They just kept piling on the paper, like burying me under a mountain of nonsense would make me surrender. But here's the sick part. It works. I've since learned this is a playbook used by HOAs across the country. They use bylaws with vague wording, rules like maintain visual consistency or avoid disruptive elements. And then they weaponize those rules against anyone who dares to be different. A real example? A man in Arizona was fined $3,000.00 for planting a native cactus species that clashed with the neighborhood aesthetic. Another in Georgia lost his home for parking his work van overnight, violating a non-compatible vehicle visibility clause. And let's not forget the woman in California who was told her wheelchair ramp wasn't HOA approved and had to tear it down. All legal, all enforceable if you don't push back. That's when I realized, this isn't about rules, it's about power. Karen didn't care if my mailbox was red or blue. She cared that I said no. She couldn't control my land, so she tried to control my peace of mind. And when the paper didn't break me, they escalated. Because if fear by fine didn't work, then fear by fire just might. What they didn't know was that I had cameras. After someone vandalized my mailbox a week earlier, I'd installed motion-activated night vision surveillance across my property. They didn't know I was watching when the two maintenance workers showed up in the dark. They didn't know their voices would be caught clearly when they said, "Just smoke him out, he'll beg to comply by morning." They didn't know I had proof. But I did. And when Officer Rodriguez watched that footage, his face went pale. "This isn't just HOA harassment," he said. "This is arson. This is conspiracy." And just like that, the game changed. Because when rules are used as weapons, the only way to fight back is with truth and fireproof evidence. The smell of smoke woke me, but it was the silence that terrified me most. No dogs barking, no tires screeching, just the low roar of something burning, too close. I threw open my window. My grandfather's tractor, his pride, my legacy, was a bonfire in the night. Flames clawed at the stars. Orange sparks danced across the sky. And in the glow I saw them. Figures standing across the street, not helping, not calling 911, just watching. One stepped forward into the light, a Karen Wilkins, in a bathrobe, arms crossed, a smile on her face. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just neighborhood drama. This was war. But what she didn't know was that I had eyes everywhere. After the mailbox incident, I'd installed cameras around the property. Night vision, motion activated, fully backed up to the cloud. And those cameras? They caught everything. 2 men dressed as Oak Ridge maintenance staff approached my tractor at 12:17 a.m. They placed bright yellow violation stickers on it. Then one pulled out a red gas can. "We'll just scare him," one said. "Karen wants this thing gone by morning. She said tag it, not torch it. Relax, just a little fire. Make it smoke, he'll call the fire department." And then he poured. The next morning, Officer Rodriguez sat in my kitchen, jaw clenched as he replayed the footage. Twice. "This isn't just vandalism," he said. "This is arson, destruction of private property, and conspiracy to commit a crime." Within 15 minutes, backup arrived. I watched from my porch as officers crossed the street, tablets in hand, still images from the footage loaded and ready. Karen stood smugly, arms folded, until she saw what they had. Her face turned to stone. The treasurer tried to walk away. An officer blocked him. Karen raised her voice. "They weren't supposed to light it. It was just a warning." That slip was all they needed. Handcuffs clicked. Karen and 2 board members were escorted to waiting police cars. As they passed me, she turned her head and hissed, "This isn't over. You'll never win against the association." But in that moment, it wasn't about winning. It was about proving, and the cameras had done exactly that. Here's the truth. Most bullies don't fear your fists. They fear evidence. Because while intimidation fades, proof speaks forever. If I hadn't installed those cameras, if I hadn't recorded that night, I'd be the one under investigation, defending some crazy tractor fire story. Instead, the truth had a timestamp, a file number, and a badge behind it. But the fight wasn't over, because within 24 hours Karen was released on bail, and the very next morning she returned. This time with a protest, signs, and a lawyer. I hadn't even finished sweeping up the ashes from my tractor when the black SUVs started pulling in. At first I thought it was more police, maybe another inspection, maybe Karen filed a complaint. But then I saw the seal, United States Secret Service. A tall woman with short cropped hair approached, flashing a badge. "Mr. Taylor, I'm Agent Collins. We need to secure your property immediately. You're hosting a high-priority visitor in less than 3 hours." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Hosting who?" Before she could answer, my phone buzzed. "Jamal." Surprise, the message read, "POTUS is on his way. Keep it quiet." POTUS. The President of the United States. Coming to my farm. Suddenly my yard turned into a federal operation. Men with dogs swept the property. Tech teams set up satellite links. Metal detectors went up along my graveled driveway. Meanwhile, at the edge of my land, Karen was back. Not alone. She brought protesters. Signs read, "No farms in Oak Ridge. Join Oker or leave and protect our property values." Agent Collins peered through binoculars. "They're staying just outside your property line, legally annoying but not actionable, yet—" My blood boiled. She'd just been arrested for arson. Now she was back to chanting in a bathrobe and pearls. And then came the sound of rotors. A sleek black helicopter descended, kicking up dust and loose hay. Jamal stepped out first. Then him. President Thompson. Smiling, waving, walking toward me with boots in the mud and a hand extended like we were old friends. "Sam Taylor," he said, "the man with the burned-down tractor and the future of American agriculture in his backyard." I tried to speak, failed, nodded instead. He toured the property, listened to Jamal talk about vertical farming, food security, water conservation. "This land," the president said, "has everything we need. Elevation, soil, water access." Then his smile dropped as he gestured toward the charred shell of the John Deere. I was briefed on what happened. Arson on federal project grounds isn't just illegal, it's a national threat. And as if on cue, Karen stepped forward, breaking through the Secret Service perimeter. "This man violated our HOA standards," she shouted. "That tractor was an eyesore." The president turned, his voice cold. Ma'am, interfering with a federally supported agriculture site is a federal crime, and arson carries a minimum 10-year sentence. Karen froze. It was just supposed to be a warning. Agent Collins stepped forward. Are you admitting to conspiracy, ma'am? Karen's mouth opened, but nothing came out. They led her away. Here's what I learned that day. You never know who's watching your fight. Sometimes it's nosy neighbors with cameras. Sometimes it's a nation looking for hope. And sometimes it's the president himself. But just as things began to settle, one of Jamal's scientists approached him, eyes wide. Sir, the soil, it's glowing. The soil was glowing. Literally. Under a special light held by one of the president's science advisors, the sample from my land shimmered faintly, like stardust buried beneath clay. I leaned over. Is that normal? The scientist looked up, pale. No, Mr. Taylor, that's extremely rare and extremely valuable. That night the experts didn't sleep. Neither did I. They ran dozens of tests across my field. Soil chemistry, radiation scans, even magnetic resonance checks. By morning the results were in. Rare earth minerals. And water. A lot of it. Deep beneath my modest 5 acres sat a reservoir, an aquifer large enough to supply clean water to an entire county. Combined with the vertical farming prototype Jamal's team had brought, it was the perfect ecosystem. But that wasn't what shocked me most. What shocked me was who already knew. Agent Collins returned just after sunrise with a stack of documents. We traced the drone that's been circling your property, she said, sliding over a photo. It belongs to Westland Development. I froze. That name. I'd seen it before, on letters offering to buy my land, on campaign donation reports tied to Karen's HOA position. Always polite, always anonymous. Westland isn't just a real estate firm, Collins continued. It's a shell corporation under AquaCore Industries, the biggest private water rights holder in the U.S. Suddenly everything made sense. The HOA pressure. The beautification complaints. The mailbox violations. Even the fire. They didn't want my tractor gone. They wanted what was under it. Sam, Jamal said quietly, they were never afraid of your land. They were afraid of what would happen if someone like you kept control of it. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just a farm anymore. This was a battleground for the future. Because in a world running dry, water is power. And whoever controls the source writes the rules. I looked back at Karen's protest signs now dumped in a ditch. Join HOA or leave. No, join the fight or lose everything. That afternoon I found something else in the old county archives. A 1972 geological survey signed by my grandfather. It confirmed water rights, still attached to the deed. Not only did I own the land, I owned the water underneath. Here's what I learned. Sometimes the enemy isn't standing in your driveway screaming about mailbox colors. Sometimes they're sitting in glass offices miles away, writing checks to silence you, before you realize how much your silence is worth. But I wasn't staying silent anymore. And neither was the Department of Justice. Because just as Agent Collins finished her sentence, we just got confirmation. Westland's CEO is on his way here. For weeks I'd been on the defensive. Dodging fines, fighting flames, watching my neighbors turn their backs out of fear. But the night I learned about the aquifer, something inside me shifted. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was time to fight back, on my terms. Agent Collins sat at my kitchen table, reviewing surveillance data from the drone. Westland Development CEO, Marcus Reynolds, she said, tapping his photo. He's connected to 3 separate land disputes in the last year, all involved environmental violations, followed by mysteriously convenient HOA complaints. And let me guess, I said, each property sits over water or minerals. She nodded, exactly. So we came up with a plan. Bait the trap. Make them act. Catch them in the open. I drafted a single, cryptic social media post. Big news tomorrow. This little farm is about to change everything. Then I added a photo of my half-burned tractor with an American flag draped over the engine. I didn't name names, didn't tag anyone, but I knew they'd see it. And they did. By nightfall, Karen was back, this time with more than picket signs. My cameras picked up her pacing along the edge of my property, whispering furiously into her phone. "She's calling Reynolds," Agent Collins confirmed. "And Reynolds is calling someone labeled the Commissioner. We're tracing him now." That's when I knew the deeper network was waking up. And if they were going to make their move, this was the moment. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I stood in the shadows of my old barn, watching my field through binoculars. Waiting. And just past 3 a.m. they came. 3 intruders. Black masks. Gloved hands. One of them carried a gas can. I stayed hidden, but I wasn't alone. The Secret Service had been stationed around the property. The moment the intruders crossed my fence line, the lights snapped on. Floodlights, sirens, tactical units. Within 60 seconds they were pinned to the ground. One mask came off. Marcus Reynolds, CEO of Westland Development. Caught trespassing. Caught attempting sabotage. Caught on federal land. As he was cuffed, he looked up at me and sneered. "You think this ends with me? We have senators, judges. You're nothing." I didn't answer. I just held up my phone, still recording. Here's the lesson I learned that night. You don't need to be powerful to win. You just need to stop playing defense. And start playing smart. They wanted to turn my land into a corporate gold mine. Instead, they walked into a federal sting operation run by a farmer. But it wasn't over yet. Because just as Reynolds was shoved into a squad car, Agent Collins' radio crackled to life. "Confirmed, the Commissioner is en route. ETA 20 minutes. The first SUV screeched to a halt just as dawn broke over my field. A man in a sharp gray suit stepped out, confident, polished, and irritated. Commissioner James Harrison, head of the State Agricultural Land Board, one of the most powerful men in regional land regulation, and, according to Agent Collins' investigation, the final piece of the puzzle. As he strode toward us, pretending not to notice the flashing lights or Reynolds already handcuffed in the back of a cruiser, I stepped forward. "Commissioner Harrison," I said, "you're just in time. We were about to discuss the illegal harassment of private landowners under your jurisdiction." He froze, then smirked. "You've made quite a mess here, Mr. Taylor." Before I could respond, FBI agents surrounded him. "You're under investigation for conspiracy, bribery, and obstruction of federal agricultural development," one agent said, reading him his rights. Harrison's face went white. Reynolds shouted from the cruiser, "You can't take us all down. You don't know who you're dealing with." But I did. They were bullies in suits, hiding behind bureaucracy and HOA bylaws. And now, stripped of their power, they looked smaller than ever. Karen was next. Agent Collins confronted her on camera at the property line. "Karen Wilkins, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit arson, witness intimidation, and accepting illegal campaign contributions tied to land coercion." Her mouth opened in protest. But the crowd of neighbors, once silent, now stood watching. Phones out, cameras rolling. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she said, voice trembling. "Marcus said to scare him, not burn anything. I didn't know about the aquifer or the minerals." Too late. She was cuffed and led away. Her power, once built on fear, fines, and fake rules, was gone. Here is what I learned that morning. Power built on control crumbles the moment truth steps into the light. Karen wasn't a criminal mastermind. She was a pawn, propped up by money, fear, and a system that punished people for daring to stand out. But the people around her, the ones writing checks, forging documents, and orchestrating sabotage, they knew exactly what they were doing. And now they'd pay for it. That afternoon, headlines exploded. Immigrant plot, FBI busts nationwide, HOA corruption network. Vertical farm hero brings down state officials. From tractor fire to federal takedown. My quiet farm had become the epicenter of a movement. Other landowners across the country came forward with stories just like mine: threats, sabotage, bribery, intimidation. And for the first time they saw that standing up wasn't hopeless. Because one burned tractor had become a symbol. But even as the cameras faded, I knew one thing: this wasn't the end. It was the start of something much bigger. 3 weeks after the arrests, my field looked different. Not because of new crops or equipment or security fences, but because of the sunflowers. Dozens of them, planted in neat rows along the edge of my land. Yellow, brilliant, unapologetically proud. And the people planting them? My neighbors. Folks who had once crossed the street to avoid making eye contact. Now they were out here with gloves and shovels, kids and grandparents included. Maria, the new acting HOA president, wiped sweat from her forehead and smiled. We figured it was time this place stopped being a war zone and started becoming a symbol. And it was. Because my fight had become more than personal. Newspapers called it a quiet revolution. Farming publications dubbed my place the first vertical farming beacon site in the country. And Jamal? He called it something else. Proof, he said, that rural America still holds the keys to the future. The aquifer beneath my land had become protected by federal designation. The rare minerals were now part of a joint sustainability initiative. But to me, it was still Granddad's land. Still the same dirt he'd worked with his bare hands. Still the same place where I'd rebuilt a half-burned tractor just because some things are worth saving. One rainy Tuesday I got a knock on the door. It was Tomas, Karen's husband. Soaked to the bone, holding a covered dish. "She made lasagna," he said awkwardly. "Karen wanted to say thank you for not burying her completely. She's doing community service now, teaching gardening at the senior center." I took the dish and nodded. We didn't say much, but the silence felt a lot different than before. This time it wasn't heavy with tension. It was filled with change. Here's what I learned from all of this. Legacy isn't about what you inherit. It's about what you fight to protect, and what you leave better than you found it. I didn't start this battle looking for fame or justice or a place in the news cycle. I just wanted peace. A quiet place, a tractor that still ran. But sometimes standing your ground isn't just about keeping what's yours. It's about showing others that they can stand too. That weekend, a school bus pulled into the gravel driveway. 20-something fourth graders jumped out, wide-eyed, excited. One little girl walked up to the restored John Deere, looked at me and asked, "Did you know your tractor would start a revolution?" I laughed. "No, sweetheart. I just knew it was worth fighting for." And then came the call. The president. Again. "Sam, you ready for this to go nationwide?" When the president called, I was sitting on my porch, sipping black coffee, watching the morning fog roll across my field. "Sam," he said, "we're going national. Your farm was just the beginning." And just like that, everything changed. Again. Within weeks, the federal government launched the Food Security Innovation Act, built on the model we proved right here on 5 acres of stubborn soil. My vertical farming tower, once a prototype, was now the first of dozens being replicated across the country. In Detroit, a former factory became a fresh food engine. In New Mexico, an abandoned lot turned into a desert-hardened hydroponic haven. In Appalachia, a mining ghost town found new life growing greens under solar glass. From Rust Belt to Green Belt, the papers called it. But to me it was something simpler. It was neighbors feeding neighbors. It was old land with new hope. It was proof that the people who grow the food should never be ignored again. Jamal came by one afternoon, touring the new control hub set up in my barn. He stood in silence, watching data pour across a row of screens: moisture levels, yield rates, nutrient density, all optimized through the system he helped build. "We thought this was just a test site," he said, "but you made it something bigger. You made it matter." I looked out at the sunflower-lined fence and smiled. "Nah," I said, "it was never just a farm. It was a line in the dirt. And someone had to draw it. Here's what I know now. Every fight starts small. A fine in your mailbox, A rule no one voted on. A letter telling you to conform. And it's easy to shrug, to stay quiet, to comply just to keep the peace. But peace built on silence isn't peace. It's surrender. And if you give up your voice long enough, someone else will speak for you. Someone like Carrot, or Reynolds, or Harrison. People who confuse power with ownership. But this story wasn't just about beating them. It was about what came next. A new way to farm. A new way to feed. A new way to protect the soul of a country that once tried to pave over its farmers. And somehow a green and yellow tractor helped lead the charge. As the camera crews packed up and the programs expanded across all 50 states, one final headline caught my eye. The farm that fought back and fed a nation. So if you're listening to this, wondering if standing your ground is worth it, if you're staring at a fight that feels too big, too ugly, too impossible, let me tell you what I told that little girl on the field trip. No one starts a revolution on purpose. But sometimes defending your land is all it takes. And that is how my tractor saved America.